Good morning. And good morning, Mr. McKeever. We're ready to begin with Mr. Brattey.
Mr. Brattey, my lord.
Right. Good morning, Mr. Brattey.
Good morning.
As you understand, you're about to be asked some questions by Mr. McKeever, who's sitting opposite you. But first of all, I understand you're prepared to take the oath.
Yes.
Sitting where you are, could I ask you to raise your right hand and repeat these words after me? I swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God.
That I will tell the truth.
That I will tell the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Thank you, Mr. Brattey. I don't know how long your evidence will take. We've scheduled the morning. We usually take a coffee break at about 11:30. But if you want to take a break at any other time, just give me an indication and we can take a break. Now, Mr. McKeever.
Good morning. Good morning.
Could you tell the inquiry your name, please?
David Brattey.
And what's your current occupation?
Retired.
I understand that formerly you were at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital from around April 2015 until you retired, is that right?
That's correct.
When did you retire?
30th of March 2018.
What was your job title at the Queen Elizabeth?
Senior Estates Manager.
And I understand as well from reading your statement that you had something of a winding down period before you retired. Would that be correct?
Yes, from the 5th of January 2018 through to the 30th of March, I was on a phased retirement.
And what did that involve?
January, it was a 4-day week. February, a 3-day week, and March, 2 days a week.
Now, I mentioned a moment ago of having gleaned that from your statement to the inquiry. Are you content to adopt that statement as your evidence before the inquiry today?
Yes.
There'll be times when I take you to that statement or to other documents. If and when I do that, they'll come up on the screen directly in front of you, so you'll be able to read the parts that I'm taking you to then. Okay, so the first session questions I have for you are about your role at the Queen Elizabeth. You've already told me once, but again, what was your job title at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital?
My job title was a senior estates manager.
And you had roles at other hospitals before you moved there. You've set them out at, if the statement comes up at page 182 of this week's bundle, and you'll see there's a list that you've completed of your previous posts. I wonder, rather than taking us through that point by point, if you could just summarise from memory your career path through the NHS.
Well, I joined the NHS in 1973 as an apprentice electrician. I was with the Western Regional Hospital Board, so that took 4 years. I then became an approved electrician in 1977. I was working in the sort of primary care sector at that time, although it wasn't really known as a primary care. That was for 13 years till 1990. And then during the mid-80s, we had a change of boss, and he encouraged me to go back to school, as it were, and do my ONC and HNC, which I did. And then I was looking for estates officers' jobs around about the 90s, early 90s. So, estates officer primarily initially in Dyke Bar Hospital in Paisley, and then across to the RAH. And in that period of time, I ended up going from maintenance to projects and doing that. And then 2010 to 2014, I was at the RAH, initially on a secondment to help the project officer there deal with a lot of work regarding environmental issues and stuff like that.
You're still an estates manager at this point?
Yeah. And so there was quite a lot of money that came down from sort of central government, and it had to be spent at the RAH to bring that up to a standard. So the project manager there needed a hand. So I was seconded over there initially for 3 months, then it got extended to 6 months and then a year. and then he left to go to another job, and then I inherited that job, as it were. And then 2014, right out of the blue, I was approached to see if I wanted to take up a secondment at the Southern General Hospital for maintenance. And I only had a couple of days to think about it, but I said yes to that. So I transferred to the Southern General in the middle of June 2014, and that was for a year's secondment finish.
And that, understand that meant becoming a senior estates manager rather than
Yes.
estates manager as you
Yes.
were before.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. There's one thing that you mentioned in your statement. It's on page 183. In the second block there, you mentioned becoming an authorised person for brackets MGPS.
Yes,
during
medical
your time
gas pipeline systems.
Sorry, I spoke over you there. MGPS means?
Medical gas pipeline systems.
Now, what did that particular position involve, becoming an authorised person?
Well, initially it was a backup to the existing AP on the site. The authorised engineer sort of mentioned that there really should be 2 APs for the size of installation. So a second AP needed to be appointed, and I was that person.
And just to be clear about AP, AP stands for authorised person.
Yes.
That's a specific role that is required.
Yes.
And required by what?
Well, it's if there's any work required to be done on the system, it's an AP that needs to be in charge of it, as it were, and he needs to authorise work under a permit to work system. So generally the AP wrote the permit to work for whatever's required to be done, whether that was maintenance by the quality control team or work on the external tank by Air Products or whatever. It was all done under the guidance of the AP.
And your specific AP appointment was in relation to medical gas.
Sorry?
You told us that your specific appointment as an AP was in relation to medical gas pipelines.
Oxygen, nitrous, things like that, medical air.
Did you have to do any special training to get that appointment?
Yes, I had to go to, it was 5 days training. I can't remember initially where it was now. It might have been in Glasgow, or it might have been down in Fallfield. There was a training centre down near Bristol, but I can't remember if I went to that initially. But it was a 5-day course.
Okay, thank you. Now, right at the end of your summary there, you mentioned that you took a secondment to the Southern General Hospital, and that was in 2014.
Yes.
So when I say referring to your summary, I'm speaking about the oral summary.
Yes, that's correct.
And the Southern General's the same site, or part of the site anyway, that is now the Queen Elizabeth Hospital,
Yes.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Your job at Southern General was Senior Estates Manager. Did you have, during your time, in fact, can you give me the dates again for your time at Southern General?
It was June 14. I moved to the Southern General, and I was initially seconded there for a year, but then I was interviewed for the post of Senior Estates Manager in the new hospital, I think at the end of December, beginning of January 2015, and I took up that post in April when the sort of start of patient migration. So I didn't complete my secondment for the year, it was 10 months.
Okay. So during your time at Southern General, that would be at the time that the build was being finished off for the Queen Elizabeth. Did you have any responsibilities for the new hospital that was being built?
No.
Did you have any involvement with that new build during your time at Southern General?
None at all. I was invited over a couple of times just to have a look around. I think certainly before Christmas I was over on 1 or 2 occasions just to have a look around by I can't remember, one of the Brookfield reps invited me over to have a look. And that's all it was, just a look around.
Okay. And what was the job at the Queen Elizabeth?
Senior estates manager.
Senior estates manager.
Yes.
Is that the same job, the same roles and responsibilities that you were doing at Southern
Yes.
General? Did you continue to have responsibilities over the old Southern General?
I did. I looked after the autoclave contract up in microbiology in the lab block, and medical gases, the medical gas pipeline systems in the existing retained estate. So that was the maternity, the neurosurgery, and other things like that on the retained. So I was involved in that.
Did you have other responsibilities that you didn't carry over at the time that you moved to QEH?
I can't think of any. It was a very similar job once I moved across.
As a senior estates manager, were you responsible for other people?
Yes, I had 5 duty managers below me. They worked on a shift rotation type thing in the new hospital, and I had supervisors below that, and then the tradesmen, the technicians, which we had electrical, mechanical, and plumbing, and then we had other tradesmen, joiners, painters and decorator painters, and maintenance assistants.
Okay, I'd like to get a picture of what your job actually involved. So I wonder if you can describe when you moved over in April 2015, what your day-to-day work would have been.
Well, when I moved over in April, as I say, I'd only been over in the hospital a couple of times, so for the first few months I was just trying to find my way around the hospital, get myself familiarised with the plant equipment, meet people that I was going to be dealing with. I started to go, Ian Powry introduced me to the huddle, which was the management meeting at 8:30 every morning on the level 3. It was run by the sort of director of nursing, I think it was Anne Hartness, and that was a core part of my day. I had to be at that huddle every day, 8:30 on the dot. And as much as Ian might give me work to do over the course of my job there, a lot of my work came from that huddle meeting. And it would generally be what's happened on the previous night, a few things like that, and then she would just look at me and say, David, we need to deal with this, we need to deal with that. And basically that was my workload for the day. I couldn't really delegate it to anybody because the duty managers, they were up to their eyes dealing with the supervisors and the men and stuff like that. So a lot of the work that came from the huddle, I just had to take it on board myself and deal with it as best I could.
Okay, well, a couple of things from that. That sounds as if you were being given tasks as they'd arisen immediately prior to the huddle. Is that correct?
Yeah, it could have sort of been what has happened during the night that needed to be rectified during the day.
Does it follow from that then that there would have been no particular pattern to the type of tasks that you'd be undertaking?
Yeah.
So those are tasks coming from the huddle.
Yes.
But you mentioned also that there's another source that you might be getting work from.
A boss.
Your boss would be who?
Ian Powry.
Ian Powry. How did you get allocated tasks by Ian Powry?
We would meet up. I saw Ian every day, practically, because his office was just up the corridor from mine. So either he would come down and see me, or that's generally how it worked. He would just have a chat with me and say, "This is he would like me to look at a particular thing or whatever." It was very rarely a formal thing. It was just generally a conversation.
Okay, so these were generally oral instructions rather than being written or
Yes,
electronic
yes,
instructions.
Yeah. I mean, he would send the odd email, but generally it was an oral instruction. He didn't give me a lot of work over the 3 years I was there. He didn't give me a huge amount of work to do because I had plenty of work to do myself, if you know what I mean.
The tasks that were given to you, were they recorded?
By Ian.
Either by Ian or from the huddle?
Yes, they were down on we got a report from the huddle. The huddle, everybody at the end of the huddle got a resume of what was discussed at that huddle. Sometime later on in the day that came down via email.
And would there be tasks allocated to you by name within that?
There may have been, but generally I got the gist of what needed to be done at the huddle, and that's I took a note of that and tried to carry them out as best I could.
And again, you may have alluded to this, but what type of tasks were they? Can you give me examples of the sorts of things that you'd been asked to do?
Oh, mostly it related around the wards. So if there was an issue in a particular room that needed to be rectified, and as I say, over the course of my time there, we had various things going on there. We had window blind issues where the mechanism of the blind had failed, and then the blind was either fully open or fully closed. So that either meant that the patient couldn't get to sleep at night because the blinds were wide open, or vice versa. They couldn't get any light into the room other than artificial light because the blinds were down. So it was trying to investigate that, see what the problem was, and trying to get that rectified. But that was a bigger problem. That took months to resolve because the mechanisms were breaking in a lot of the rooms, and it needed an outside. I needed a contractor to come in and actually try and investigate why these mechanisms were breaking. One of the reasons is the blinds the blind was in between two pieces of glass, and the mechanism was to open the blind or close the blind, not pull the blind up or down. And I think that was what was happening. The user, patient eye, was trying to pull the blind up or down, and the mechanism in the top snapped, causing the blind either to be fully open or fully closed.
Did I pick you up right that this was something you required to instruct contractors to fix?
Yes, we had to try and work out a solution to try and see how this mechanism could be repaired to allow the blind to operate properly.
So window blinds would be an example of a practical problem that was allocated to you to fix, and that you looked at yourself but decided you had to get external help to fix.
I think it might have been. We may have spoken to Brookfield in this as well, because this happened very early on after the hospital opened. So I think they were involved as well to a degree, but it required an external contractor out with the contractor that installed them.
Okay.
Come in and look at it.
So that would be one type of hardware issue.
Yeah.
Can you give me example of maybe one or two other?
We had we had smells in the rooms. So certain rooms had to be taken out of action because of a smell, of an odour within the room that nobody could fathom out what this was. But it was, when you go into the room, you immediately you sense that you couldn't spend any time in there. So that was a room that was out of action. And as far as Anne was concerned, that's one room less that they can have a patient occupying in it. So we were trying to investigate, did something get spilled onto the floor or whatever. We couldn't really get our heads around what was causing this. And we opened up a wall and we had people in looking at it and this, that, and the next thing. And we just, over time. And it came to be that we felt the floor was contaminated in some way or other. And the only way to eradicate the smell was to remove the flooring. So that took from lifting the flooring to relaying a new piece of flooring and getting the room all cleaned up and ready for occupation again. That took 3 to 4 days. So that was.
I take it that wasn't work that you carried out yourself.
I didn't carry that out myself. But I made it happen, if you know what I mean. I got everybody involved that needed to be in there to do that work. So I had to get the contractor in, show him the thing, agree when it could be done, get an HEI scribe written up for that piece of work. So it was involved.
Okay. Can you recall what wards that was with contaminated floor?
It was all over the medical ward. Over a period of time, we had a room here, a room there, a room up. There was no kind of sense to it. It could be anywhere. It just happened.
When you say contaminated, what do you mean by that? Are you using contaminated to mean that it put out a bad smell, or?
It put out a bad smell that the patient couldn't tolerate, and if you went into the room, you wouldn't be able to tolerate it either. So we couldn't fathom out where this smell was coming from. But the conclusion was, if we removed the flooring and put a new piece of lino down, and that did seem to work, that seemed to eradicate it. Once the flooring was removed and a new piece went down, the smell was gone.
You aware of what happened to the old flooring when it was taken away?
No, I don't know what happened to that.
Do you know if anybody looked at it or tested it, or if it was just dumped?
It was probably just dumped. I don't know. We did have specialists in the early days trying to see what it was, but we weren't making any headway with that.
Okay, so the picture I'm getting from you is it's a mixed bag of tasks. Problem solving, would that be a fair way of putting it?
Problem solving, yeah.
And these would be essentially random problems allocated to you to solve.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you whether you were hands-on with those tasks, but the picture I'm getting is that often you weren't hands-on. Were there other tasks where you would be hands-on?
No, I think I was a coordinating person. I just had to make sure that the task happened. It was either me speaking to somebody below me, my duty manager or the supervisor, whatever, or getting onto a contractor and getting someone into the hospital to have a look at it to see if they could sort the problem.
Okay. When a task was completed, what happened next?
The room was cleaned. It was totally thoroughly cleaned, and then it was given back to the ward to be occupied again. Did
you have to record that in any way?
I think we did record that. I think on that there was. I think we created a spreadsheet of all the rooms that this occurred, and then we marked it off as being complete.
When you say all the rooms where this had occurred, are you speaking specifically about the floors at this point? Or?
Floors. It was all related to the floors. Once the lino was lifted and replaced, the smell was gone.
Okay, thank you. In general, my question was slightly more intended to be slightly more general than that. You would have had a random set of work, some to do with blinds, some to do with floors, some to do with other things. Mm-hmm. As a generality, when a task was completed, would the completion be recorded somewhere?
Not always.
What determined whether it would be recorded or not?
If we had to get multiple people in, if we had to get contractors in and stuff like that, then that. But if it was just something that we handled in-house, then it was just completed and agreed that it was complete at that point.
If, looking back, somebody had to go back and put together a record of all the work that you'd carried out in your time, would they be able to do that?
Probably not.
But they'd be able to put together some of it?
Yes, I mean, yeah, I was a pretty busy guy, I'll tell you that.
And whether or not it appeared on this record would be on the basis of whether or not it happened to be one of the tasks that got recorded.
Yes.
Now, just before I move on, one of the things that you mentioned there was completing a high scribe.
Yep.
Can you tell me what that means, please?
It's a risk assessment for healthcare and buildings, environments. So it's hospital-acquired infection. So it's mitigating that. It's putting a risk assessment together. So any work that's getting carried out, you've kind of looked at all the issues that might come up and how you're going to overcome that so that you keep the risk to a minimum when you're doing any work.
And is this specifically for work to be done to the fabric of the building?
Yes, but it can be other things as well. It's but yeah, mostly to the fabric. Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. So they were bespoke. You had to do a risk assessment pretty much for every job initially because there wasn't anything there to go by. You had to then create that from the word go and then put it to infection control, get there. Okay, sometimes we would sit down and together, infection control and I, and go through it, or quite often I would do it. I would do the assessment and then pass it, or then go and meet them and say, this is what we're planning to do. Are you okay with this?
These potentially complicated documents.
They were quite comprehensive. I wouldn't say they were difficult. You just had to go through each step in turn and make sure that the class of work and against the clientele was the correct category and stuff like that. And you just had to go through the matrix and try, and then it would all work out. But you had to put detailed stuff in of what you were going to be doing. So it was, and then if infection control were happy with that, then signed it off and said, you're good to go.
Did you have any training in how to complete these documents?
I can't honestly say I did. I think I learned myself from scratch.
And one of the things you described it there as going through the matrix and ticking things off. What does that mean?
Well, it's just looking at the class of work that you were going to be doing. Is it low hazard? Is it low, medium, high, or very high? And then the category of clientele. Is it an office? Is it a thoroughfare? Is it a ward? Or is it a ward where it's immunocompromised patients? So there's 4 things. So you've just got to then go through, and it'll work out whether it's a high hazard job or a very high hazard job, and then all the mitigations got to go against that, so that you take much more precautions on a very high hazard job than you would do in a.
Are you describing, and the word I was interested in was matrix there, are you describing a particular online form or online grid or something of that nature?
It's a standard thing. When you download the document, it's there in front of you. You're not making it up, it's there. Once you go through the tasks and the area that you're going to be working in, then you look at this and then it'll tell you the class of job that it falls under, and that's where you then got to mitigate the risks associated with that class.
Okay, how do you know at which level those risks, or even which type of job it would be?
If you're working in a clinical ward, that comes under a certain class. So then you would then go to the matrix and you would look at that, and you just come down and it would say a high hazard job there. So high hazard means this is what you need to do if it's high hazard, so that you're not going to do anything detrimental. Everything that you're going to do is going to keep everything safe whilst you're doing that job.
Did you also say that once you'd been through that process, it would be then for you to enter details of the job into the high script?
You would enter the details, you would handwrite the details of the job or type that in, the details of the job. And the mitigations that you're going to look, what protective measures that you were going to put into place whilst you were doing that job.
And how would you know what details were important to be entered in?
You would I think experience tells you what you need to put in there. Your job, you just learn that, if you know what I mean. But if I omitted something, infection control would tell me, David, we need to put this in here. You need to do this. You need to do that. So they would bounce that back to me and say, you've missed something out here, or you've done this. But generally, after a while, I was quite competent at doing these. So generally, first time around, it was good to go. Okay,
so in general, if I can try to summarise that process, you'd be given a grid or a matrix to fill in that determined what risk level effectively there was for the job. Secondly, it was for you to enter details of the job and details of mitigating measures that you'd be taking. And you say that you simply would know that from your experience.
Yes.
And then thirdly, that would go to infection control, who would then have input into the process.
Yes.
But you didn't have any specific training on the process itself. It was just something you picked up.
Yes, because I was doing the HEI scribes at the RAH, and I think I was doing them at Dyke Bar. So they've been in existence for a long time. So, yes.
Okay, thank you. I mean, moving on to think about training generally. You've already told me the job title was the same when you moved from Southern General to Queen Elizabeth. But in terms of environment, would it be fair to say that your job changed completely?
Yeah, the old hospital was on its last legs, as it were, so it was very old equipment, and you just had to get it over the line, as it were. You just had to try and keep it running until it closed, or to the part of it. You know, it didn't all close. You know, they say neurosurgery, maternity was still there, but the older part, the very old part, you just had to keep it going until the last patient was out the door. And the new hospital, you've got this brand new facility, you're just thinking, great, you're going to get in there and you won't have the issues that you faced in the last 6 months. It'll just all be plain sailing.
And you mentioned already that your first, I think you said your first few months were about familiarising yourself with your surroundings to a large extent. And that makes sense because you're dealing with an estate that, albeit it's adjacent to the one you've been working in, is effectively entirely new to you. Is that fair?
Yes.
Did you have any induction training to help you with this?
I don't think I did, actually. No, I think I had half a day with Brookfield going through Zootech or something, which is the database for the assets. I think that's all I've really had. I don't think I had any induction training as such. I just had to familiarise myself, and that being myself, get round the building as often as I could in these first few weeks, first few months.
Did that strike you as a problem?
No, initially I was very keen to get in there and see it for myself and get round. So,
looking back on it now, does it seem to you that that was best practice, if I put it like that, to put you into a new job on a new estate, or the same job on a new estate, but for the training only to amount to half a day's induction on Zootech, a computer system?
yeah, in hindsight, it probably would have been better to have been shown around more often and shown the critical plant and stuff like that. And yeah, it was a big ask, but as I say, I was very, very keen to get in there and start doing a good job.
You mentioned as an example, their critical plant is something you should probably have seen more of. Are there any examples of that come to mind as times when induction would have been useful or would have helped, and you were a little bit at sea because you were having to deal with something where you hadn't had induction?
Yeah, I think the huge plant room in level 3, plant room 33, which was absolutely enormous. You could get lost in there. I think that would have been beneficial had I been shown that in advance and taken around all the plant that was in there. As I say, it was such a huge room. That would have been beneficial.
And just in practical terms, how would it have helped?
You can see where all the main air handling units were for the theatres and stuff like that, and just the medical area, everything. There was an awful lot of equipment housed in that room. It was just enormous.
And I take it if you were looking in that room, that would mean that you had been allocated tasks that meant that you had to do things in that room. Would that be right?
Later on, you mean?
Yes.
Yes, later on. I was in that room practically every day of my working life in that hospital.
Okay, so when you're saying that lack of induction was a hindrance, does that mean that it made those jobs more difficult, made them impossible, made them slower? What was the hindrance to you?
I don't think it was a hindrance as such. I got familiar with that room fairly quickly because, as I say, I was in there often. So I don't think it was too much of a hindrance. It would have been beneficial, I suppose, right at the start. But after finding my feet there, I was in that room every day.
Okay, setting aside the plant room, if we think about key events or key tasks that ought to be undertaken at the hospital, things like asset tagging or validation of systems and so on, did you have any induction or introduction to those systems?
No.
If we move on to page 191 of the statement now, this is part of, I'm interested in the top part of the page. If we go back one page, question 29, the question here is about operating systems at handover. And question B is what training was put in place for maintaining the operating systems. And then if we go over to 191, you said you don't know what training was put in place other than a session showing how to use Zootech and chilled water systems training. Zootech is the one you mentioned.
Yeah.
Chilled water systems training, you come on to more in the question below, and you say Brookfield Multiplex carried out training on chilled water. However, I was not aware of this and did not participate.
That's right. I only participated in the Zootech training, which was half a day or a day, where we were invited over to the Brookfield offices, and this was before the hospital, before patient migration.
Do you know how, excuse me, how was it that you were not made aware of the chilled water training?
Well, I was still, I don't know the answer to that. I was working in the old Southern General this time. As I say, I was only invited over occasionally, and but you know, it was still, you know, another hospital. I wasn't involved with that at all. I wasn't invited. I didn't ask to go. I was so busy keeping the old hospital running that I just, if I was invited over, I would go over, but I wasn't.
Were there other examples of training being put on that you didn't attend that you can recall?
I don't know is the answer to that.
Was training something you were looking out for?
I wasn't.
I mean, you mentioned also that you were in charge of what sounds like a fairly hefty team, or certainly that you were supervising deputy estate managers and so on. Did you encourage your those responsible to you to participate in training?
No, I didn't. I didn't know their level of training when I took over. That was the complement of staff we had, and we were just set out to start working in a new hospital. So I didn't know who was qualified in what, or what training people had. So I wasn't involved in the training at all prior to taking up my post.
And you mentioned qualifications there. This isn't quite a qualification, but you mentioned authorised persons already. When you got to Queen Elizabeth, were you aware of the filling of these key positions, whether there were authorised persons appointed and so on?
To be honest, it didn't occur to me. I didn't initially. I didn't know who, if there were authorised persons for the other disciplines. I knew that I was going to be, well, I assumed I would be AP for medical gases in the new site. I would still have to be trained up, not so much trained up in that, but get myself familiarised with the systems in the new part. And then the authorising engineer would come in, or I would call him at some point to say, I think I'm up to speed. And he would come in and assess me on that. But in the other disciplines, I didn't know who was, if there were APs that I'd come across or whatever. So initially, it didn't occur to me on the other disciplines.
The other disciplines being water
and ventilation.
And you say initially it didn't occur to you. Did it occur to you later? Did you make inquiries later?
I think much later, you know, much later on in that year when I was starting to attend meetings, and then, you know, it may have clicked in there that people were doing stuff and we weren't qualified to do it.
Would you be able to pinpoint a time when that thought crossed your mind?
Well, I know I started doing the maintenance for the theatres and stuff like that. So that was about a year on into the role. So that was maybe April or May 2016. We were starting to do ventilation, the verification of the theatres and stuff like that. And although I think we were doing a very good job, I suddenly realised there that I wasn't an AP for that. And I mean, if I knew that, other people above me must have known that, but we continued to do the maintenance of all the critical plant, all the theatres. We had that was an ongoing thing. We were taking a theatre out of use almost on a weekly basis because we had so many of them. So I was involved in that.
And you say you did that you considered yourself to have done a good job, even
Yes.
though that was something you weren't.
Yes.
You weren't appointed to.
Yes.
But nevertheless, you were conscious that there weren't authorised people for water or ventilation.
Mm-hmm.
Did you make inquiries as to why not?
No, I don't think I did actually. It was just so, I mean, it's hard to explain. I was just so busy at that hospital. It just got busier and busier and busier. And I was just working flat out every day. So training, no, didn't occur to me. I just was concentrating on doing my job. So I didn't. I think it came to light much further down the line when I started to attend meetings. When Alan Gallagher got appointed to the post, and then we started having area-wide estates meetings, and he was chairing that. I think APs and CPs and that came to light then, but that was much further down the line, maybe in 2016 into 2017, that time. So they had there was someone appointed to look at training, I believe, for the whole of the NHS estate. So I know the APs and CPs were mentioned at that point, or that was a topic, but I didn't personally take that on to deal with that. That was getting handled by someone else.
And you were concentrating on doing the job, but not looking into whether the appointment of these specific roles was in hand.
Correct.
Whose responsibility would it have been to make those appointments?
Well, I don't know whether that would be my boss or not, or someone, or the general manager. I don't know.
I think you said that there was a general awareness. It wasn't just yourself, but a general awareness that these roles weren't filled. Did I pick you up right?
I was aware that they weren't been filled. I don't know whether others were. I mean, they must have been. They must have known who was AP for this, that, and the next thing. But I don't know. I don't know what or how important it was to them to try and get these positions filled. I do recall an authorising engineer coming in at some point, and I think he might have been for ventilation, or he was from some other discipline, and I think he did highlight that we needed APs. But I don't know. I didn't think it was down to me to get that to happen. As I say, I was under the cosh every day. I mean, it was just such a busy environment. I just had to focus on the job in hand.
Looking back now, do you feel it's something that you ought to have raised with somebody?
Possibly right at the start when everybody was appointed, they maybe should have sat down and said, well, what's he got? What can he bring to the table? Is he an AP in this or an AP in that? Should we get him trained up? But I think APs it's all about familiarising yourself with the site, making sure you've got a thorough knowledge of the system, and then inviting the authorising engineer in for that discipline to assess you. That's how the medical gas works, because I think that's how the electricity systems work. So you just don't get appointed. You need to know the systems thoroughly, and then you invite the AE in, and then he will assess you.
Okay. I mean, you said that what made that question click for you was when you moved on to doing the water and ventilation works yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
If we move back 3 pages in your statement to page 188, this is the start of the section where you asked about training, and question 21 is quite straightforward. You're asked what formal training or qualifications you had in the following: water, none; ventilation, none; infection control, none. Does that apply equally to your time at the Queen Elizabeth? When you moved on to dealing with water and ventilation, you did that without being trained in those areas?
Yes.
And your background essentially was electrical, I think you told us at the very start.
That's correct.
It's an obvious question, but in hindsight, would it have been of benefit to you to have had training in water, in ventilation, in infection control?
It probably would have done. When I was an electrician, I worked in ventilation systems, so ventilation equipment wasn't foreign to me. As an electrician, if an air handling unit had broken down in the hospital that I was in, I would go and investigate it and fix it. So I knew ventilation was something that you dealt with on a daily basis as a tradesman.
Does it trouble you or not, then, looking back, that you were working in water or ventilation without having had training, formal training in those issues?
Formal training would have been better. I do agree.
And you mentioned ventilation as something that you were reasonably au fait with, in your view. Does the same hold for water?
No.
Did you have any experience dealing with water systems before you got there?
Yes, I think in my previous post, because when I was project manager at the RAH and stuff, we had the guidance. I had a copy of the guidance in my desk, in my drawer. I knew that if we were installing anything, it had to be to a certain standard, and we followed that. So, yeah, I knew about testing and maintenance, but wasn't directly involved in that. If you know what I mean. People below me, the supervisors, so the technicians guys were the ones that did the maintenance.
So it doesn't rise to the level of being troubling to you, but nevertheless, you say it would have been helpful to have had training in ventilation and in water. Were you conscious of that at the time when you started moving into dealing with water and ventilation more?
I wasn't conscious of it, no. I just... no, it didn't occur to me really. I was fairly confident in knowing what I could do and what I couldn't do.
Do you know if the same applied to your colleagues at similar levels or to your duty estates managers?
I don't know, to be honest. I don't know what are you talking about? Similar in other parts of the estate, i.e. Greater Glasgow and Clyde, or particularly to that hospital?
Particularly to that hospital, what I have in mind is, well, two parts. Firstly, did you know what training they had in water and ventilation, the people you were working with? And secondly, was it in the air? Was this something that you discussed among yourselves, that you were doing these tasks but hadn't had formal training on them?
No, I didn't know what they had, and no, it wasn't in the air. It was just, we just got on with it.
Thank you. On the next page, in fact, we need to go, back to page 188 to see question 24 at the bottom. The question 24 at the bottom was about water systems. So when we go over to page 189, question D there is asking you about specific legal obligations and responsibilities. And there you mentioned your awareness that you had to comply with the SHTM and L8 guidance. And you mentioned certain other things that had to be done.
Yes.
Can you explain to us briefly what you understand those documents to be, the two that you mentioned, SHTM and L8?
Well, that's Scottish Healthcare Technical Memorandum, and that's sort of basically the Bible. You've whatever they set down, both for installation and maintenance, you follow it. And L8 is the approved code of practice, and it's a very similar document. If you follow one, you should be following the other, literally mirrored each other. And if you do follow that guidance, then you should be meeting all your obligations.
Question 25 below that is essentially the same question about ventilation. So then if we go over the page to 190, question D is also about specific legal obligations and responsibilities. And there again, you say you knew you had to comply with SHTM guidance, which states that critical ventilation systems will be inspected quarterly and verified at least annually.
Yes.
Now, moving on to deal a little bit more with your ventilation work. I've got some questions about some aspects of the ventilation system, which I'll come on to in a little bit more detail. But for now, I'd like to ask about your impression of that SHTM guidance and what it meant for two particular elements of the system, chilled beams and thermal wheels. So to assist you with that, page 199, there's question 46. And it's asking about chilled beams. How does SHTM apply to the use of chilled beams in healthcare settings? And your answer there is that the SHTM guidance is non-specific and gives little guidance as to suitability of chilled beam technology within healthcare premises. You see that?
Yes, I see that. I'm reading that, yeah.
And then question 47 is slightly more specific. To what extent, if any, is use of chilled beams in areas housing immune-compromised patients compliant with SHTM guidance? And here your answer is incompatible due to the possibility of condensation and the regular cleaning required to keep the chilled beam working efficiently. Now, I'll come on later to an incident that raised both of those questions. But your position there is essentially that you can't use chilled beams in immunocompromised areas. Is that right?
Am I saying that you can use them?
You're saying that you can't use them at 47.
Yes. That's my understanding, because when I was doing that answering, that's not me recollecting back to 2015. That's me trying to read the documentation as of this year.
Okay, so this is research you've done yourself
Yes.
to answer this question.
Yes.
Okay, if I can maybe just clear that up then. We've got the SHTM guidance from the time will be within, and the document will come up on the screen. So unusually, this is within one of the Edinburgh bundles. Here we are. Page 2490 you've got in front of you is the title page of the SHTM 0301.
And if we McIver, do you have, you've explained that this is one of the Edinburgh bundles. Do you have the bundle number?
It's bundle 1 from the 26th February hearings from this year.
Thank you.
And we've already gone to the page that I was going to take you to, page 2516. Paragraph 240 at the top of the page, and I'll read it out. Consideration should be given to, we should go back one page, 2515, to see that this is a chilled beams section. And then if we go back over to 240, forward one more page. 240, consideration should be given to the ease with which specific types of chilled beam units can be accessed for cleaning, having regard to the need to control the infection risk. The impact of maintenance requirements and room availability should also be considered. Now, would you agree with me that that doesn't, in fact, amount to a prohibition on chilled beams in particular premises? Instead, what this is saying is that you should take into account specific needs, cleaning, access, room availability, and that then that will inform a decision as to whether or not chilled beams can be used on particular premises. Would you agree with that reading of it?
Yeah, I probably would, yeah.
We can ask in general then, what were the cleaning practices regarding chilled beams in the hospitals so far as you came across them?
I think they were becoming dirty more quickly than first anticipated. Again, to clean a chilled beam, we had to get access to the room, remove the cover, so the patient would not be in the room at the time, and we would seal the room off and remove the cover, let it hang down, and then we would use the HEPA filters, hoovers, to clean in between the fins.
These are essentially the very issues that are referred to in the paragraph I read out. Access, room availability. That's the sort of thing that, that you had in mind. Now,
just so that I follow that, we talked about bringing the chilled beam unit down from the roof space. Have I followed that?
No, it would be the cover, my lord. It would just be the cover that you see on the
Right, so
ceiling.
you're not moving the unit.
No, you would just unhook the one side of it, and then
Right.
it would allow it to hang. If it needed to come down completely, you would just unclip it from the hook arrangement and take it in.
And did I hear you say that you would use something to clean the HEPA filter, or do you replace the HEPA filter?
No, you stand up on the ladder or whatever apparatus you had in the room, a scarf, whatever, and you would stand and hoover in
Right,
between
so you're
the
going to
fins.
vacuum clean
The vacuum would be in your hand, and it would be a HEPA filtered vacuum.
Thank you.
On page 199 of the statement, there's an allusion to something you mentioned yourself a moment ago. Question 50 here is essentially the question I asked you. Describe your understanding at the time of the cleaning regimes in place for the chilled beams. And you say there's a ppm schedule in place. I think this is for annual cleaning. However, I think that frequency was too long and had to be reduced as the chilled beams right across the hospital were becoming dirtier more quickly. How did it come to light that annual cleaning was too long a gap?
I think people were noticing that the chilled beams were becoming dirty. They could see it on the grill. And
When you say you could see it on the grill, what do you mean by that?
you're like that. What you see in the room, you could see it had holes in it to allow the heat through. So you could see the, not dirt, it's like stour sticking to that. And that's when it became evident that they needed to be cleaned.
Okay, so these grills were physically becoming tarnished in such a way that you could see it from within the rooms.
Yes.
Do you know why they became dirtier faster than anyone had anticipated?
No, but whilst I was doing my research for answering some of these questions, I did come across something that Dr. Inkster had written. I think she had written a paper, and it was about the linen, the type of bed linen that was being used throughout the hospital, and this was somehow getting in there. You know, I think of the makeup of the bed linen. I can't describe it, but you know, I know the exact word I'm looking for here. But that get dragged up, as it were, into over time, and that contributed to the clogging up of the fins.
Okay, so this certainly won't be the right words, but effectively a kind of dust, cloth dust.
Yes, yes.
And the word you mentioned before was stour, was what you could see. So is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And she mentioned something like that in a paper that she'd written, I think after the hospital opened up, that maybe putting chilled beams into a healthcare setting might not have been the best form of heating, if you know what I mean. It was something to do with that, and I read that just recently, and whilst I was trying to answer these questions.
Okay, that wasn't something you saw yourself.
Can I just check if I've understood that? What I think you said, and tell me if I'm wrong about that, is that as a result of reading a paper, and
yes,
yeah, and when I say a paper, an article. Dr. Inkster was describing, now have I got this right, the upward movement of air? Or am I wrong?
No, it's not upward movement of air. I think it's just generally the fabric of the bedding.
Or the fabric, okay, so the fabric of the bedding is the source of the dust?
Yes.
Right. Now, to get to the chilled beam, there has to be a movement of air, am I right?
Well, yes, but I don't know whether that was you making the bed, and you know,
Okay.
I don't know how it got from the bed to there. But I think she did mention that the use of a particular form of bedding contributed to the clogging up of these beams.
Right.
That's the thing I read.
Thank you.
But just to be clear again, this is, again, your own recent research in preparation for coming here today. It's not something that you saw yourself at the time.
No.
If we move forwards a couple of pages, 201. We're moving on to thermal wheels at the bottom of this page. 53 is asking about general position regarding thermal wheels. And you say that effectively SHTM permits them in general words. You see that?
I see that, yes, sorry.
Yeah,
yes.
and then over the page at the top of the next one, 202 is the same more detailed question about immune compromised patients. And again, you say that the installation was not compliant.
That's my understanding of what the guidance was saying, I think.
And again, is that from your recent research?
Yes.
Now, I don't have a quote for you this time. I can only make a suggestion to you of something that's, because it's something that's not in the SHTM. But if I were to suggest to you that, in fact, there's no provision in the ventilation SHTM that amounts to a prohibition on thermal wheels, would you accept that?
Yes.
Thank you. Moving back to page 189 of the statement. Question 25 here is asking about roles and duties in relation to ventilation systems operation and maintenance. You see that?
Yes, I see that, yeah.
And then over the page again at the top is the similar question, how aware were you of specific legal obligations and responsibilities? And in fact, this is the one I read to you before. I know we had to comply with the SHTM guidance, which states that critical ventilation systems will be inspected quarterly and verified at least annually.
Yes.
Now, just to ask you about that, was firstly quarterly inspection, was that happening?
I believe it was. I didn't personally instruct that, but I believe the PPM was set up for that to happen.
When you say PPM was set up, can you say what you mean by that?
That's a planned preventive maintenance schedule. So that was just something that would the facilities management tool would prepare. You know, it would print out, and that would be the schedule, and it would be given to the maintenance technicians to go and carry that out.
Okay. Essentially, this is a computer-generated task system.
Yes. Yes.
And you mentioned also that critical ventilation systems were to be verified at least annually. Did that, in fact, happen to your
Yes.
knowledge? Were you involved in that?
Yes.
What systems were those critical ventilation systems?
Theatres, primarily theatres and isolation rooms.
You say primarily, were there others?
No, I think that was critical systems were all the operating theatres throughout, and both in the adults and the children, and the existing sites, the maternity and the neurosurgery. So it was all just put on one huge big spreadsheet of all the theatres, and they were being carried out. So we're practically doing one a week or one every 2 weeks.
Okay. Now, setting aside what was recorded in the spreadsheet, in your view, were there other areas that might or should have been added to the list of critical systems?
No, I think that covered most of them, I think.
So when it came to the annual verification, how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, we just approached the theatre managers. We shared the spreadsheet out at the beginning of the year, so that would be around about early 2016. That would go out to all the theatre managers for their views on that. Generally, they were absolutely fine with that. And then we would, as it came nearer the time to do it, I would see these theatre managers on a daily basis. They were generally at the huddle, and I would just say to them that we'll get theatre 1 today this week. Yes, we're fine with that. Yes, we'll see you on Wednesday. So generally, we took the theatre out of action on a Wednesday evening, and we had it all day Thursday, all day Friday, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, and it was handed back on the Monday morning. initially the theatres, some of the theatres did not pass the validation at the end of the work. And that was due to the fact that the HEPA filters in the ultra clean theatres were dirty, and they wouldn't pass the test. And these HEPA filters had a 5-year lifespan, but they were having to be replaced after a year. We didn't obviously keep these filters on site. They had to be then ordered by the company that installed them, and that company was based in Manchester, and we had to order them, pay for them, and get them delivered. And then, so that meant that theatre couldn't go back into use on the Monday, which didn't go down well, really, but I mean, they understood it. They didn't go off the deep end. They just said, that's fair enough, we'll work around it. When do you think it will be repaired? I says, well, we've ordered the filters. They should be here tomorrow, or they should be here Wednesday. So they were changed.
A knock-on effect would be that it would take the room out of action for longer than it was supposed to be out of action.
Yeah, yes. And admittedly, when the fella came up to do the HEPA filter, I said to, when he took one of them down, I actually looked at it. I said, "Oh, that looks pretty clean to me." And he says, "Aye, but wait till you see a clean one." And then when he took the new one out of the box, it was night and day. So it was clearly quite a dirty-looking filter after a year. So we had to replace that. So I think over the course of that year, I think we had to replace the HEPA filters in at least 6 or 7 theatres at £5,000 a go, which was unexpected costs. But
okay, I'll ask you pick up a little bit more on a couple of details that you raised there. But just before we go on, I asked you about verification. I think you said validation in your answer there. Are you talking about verification or validation?
Verification.
Did you see any validation documents to assess verification against?
I did. I don't know when they were handed over, but when we looked at the information on the HEPA filters, we could see in the validation documents what the parameters were and what they needed to achieve at the verification stage, and this is what they weren't achieving that. So I did see validation documentation. I was able to put my hand on it in the estate's office. It was in a hard copy, so I was able to look at that. I don't know when that got handed over to us initially, but I could look at that at the time.
Okay, so you mentioned that was in hard copy. How accessible was that to you?
Very accessible.
It was kept in the...
It was kept in the estate's office, which we had a fairly big kind of library in there of all documentation that was required to be there.
So that wasn't a problem
Nope.
for you? We were just speaking about the unexpected dirtying of the chilled beams and the grills in the wards upstairs, and here you're mentioning a different kind of unexpected dirtying, which is the HEPA filters being dirty too soon. Was this a concern for you?
Yeah, it was. Couldn't put the theatre back to use after 5 days. We had to keep it out of action for probably another 3 or 4, 5 days till we get those filters up.
Okay, so setting aside the immediate knock-on effect of that, it's the second example of things in the hospital being dirtier than anyone had anticipated. Is that a concern?
Well, it was still, when I moved in, I thought, somebody asked me, what does the hospital look like? I said, it's still a building site to me. So that's what my first kind of view of it is. There was still a lot going on, even though it was now a working hospital. So I suppose the generation of dust and stuff that get in through the ventilation grills was more than what we anticipated.
Is that speculation on your part, or is that...
Speculation.
Yeah. Do you, in fact, know why the filters in the theatres were?
No.
So just coming back to the verification process, did you compile reports as part of the work you undertook?
Yes, I think we did, yeah. Everything was documented for that.
Who would those have gone to?
They'll be in the Estates Office. It would go into the same kind of folder as per the original documentation.
You mentioned that it wasn't just a tick box exercise. There were some places that actually failed the verification initially.
Yes.
Where works were required, where action plans and the like created to put those into effect.
Not sure it was action plans. It was just things that were noted. I mean, even after 1 year, you know, if the clinical staff had dropped something onto the floor and the floor had cracked, there was a crack in the linoleum, that linoleum had to be replaced. So that had to be done. So I think initially when we took the theatre over, we would have a courtesy walk round of what, but the theatre manager would say, David, the floor's damaged, we need to get that floor fixed, or the wall's cracked, we need to get that done, or this or that. So all these things were highlighted to me pretty much on day one, on the evening of handover. I noted all that down, and then we started the thing. The thing about the theatre is you couldn't have every single contractor, every single person doing maintenance in there at the one time. That's how we had 4 days to do it. So the flooring contractor might have been in, and he gets his job done. Then we get the painter in or whatever, or the plasterer in to touch the wall up, then get that painted. So that's all done. That's how it takes 4 days. And then the medical gases get checked, everything, all that, the filters. So it took the full 4 days. And then obviously my staff are working in the plant room on the actual air handling unit. So they're cleaning that, taking the filters out, replacing them, all that stuff in the plant room. So it's all over that period of time it takes to do that. It's quite a long process.
And was all of that recorded and kept?
It would be in the folder of the main folder within the Estates Office pertaining to that theatre.
So if anybody wanted to go back and get a record of what work had been carried out, would they be able to do so?
Yes.
Something you've mentioned a few times that I haven't asked you about yet: planned preventative maintenance. At the time when you started in the Queen Elizabeth, was there adequate PPM being carried out at that time?
At the very start of the occupation of patients,
Yes.
I can't honestly say what was being carried out right there and then. I know that my staff, I think my duty manager and my supervisors were starting to create PPM. So I'm not sure what was happening on day one, but certainly we would be looking to create PPM as quickly as we could.
Okay, so that's at the very start of the process. Can we skip forward to 232 of the statement? Because there at 151, you're being asked about specifically in relation to ventilation. But your answer there is that the compliance in respect to ventilation was good. PPM was being done at correct intervals. Verification carried out, as you've told us, filters changed, records kept, service contracts in place. With regard to PPM, when you're answering that question, what period are you referring to?
Quarterly.
Quarterly throughout your period at the
Yes.
At the hospital. Is that different for the initial period when you've joined around April, second quarter of 2015?
I'm not sure when it started. To be honestly, to be fair, we had to generate the PPM and then get the intervals correct and then start doing it. So I'm not sure it was done as of April the 1st that year.
Okay, could you actually explain that to me a little bit more about generating PPM and so on? What process are you talking about?
Well, that's the actual line. That's the work, the chitty as it were, that would be given to the tradesmen or given to the technicians. So that has to be generated, and that's against looking at the asset itself, what's deemed needs to be done at certain intervals, and then that's all put down on into the system, and the line is generated and given to the tradesman to carry that out. And he may have a checklist with that so that he knows he's going through every stage there.
Okay, so this is an actual, again, an IT system, automated system,
Yes.
but it doesn't work until it's been set up.
That needs to be set up, yeah.
Okay, and are you able to pinpoint or even give an estimate as to when it was set up?
I think the supervisors were on that pretty much once they started. They were starting to do that, but you know, it's a huge hospital. I don't know how many assets were in there, and we had to kind of create PPM for everything there so that maintenance would be carried out at the correct time.
We have heard from another witness, that's Mr. Powry, that asset tagging wasn't completed until 2017. Do you know anything about that?
No, I thought. No, I don't. I thought Brookfield were tasked with that, with getting all the asset tagging done, but that's speculation. I don't know.
The reference for your lordship's benefit is page 45 of Mr. Powry's transcript.
Thank you.
Now, you say you didn't know, you don't know whether that's accurate or not. If it were accurate and asset tagging weren't completed until 2 years afterwards, would that have hindered the ability to carry out PPM in the interval?
I'm not sure it would. I think once the guys familiarised themselves with the thing, we knew where things were. So asset tagging would have been helpful, but I don't think it would have stopped us doing the PPM. We knew that was an air handling unit in that corner. That needed to be done. That needed to be maintained. We would maintain it.
Okay, moving on to a few short questions about individual aspects of the ventilation system. We've already dealt with HEPA filters. Something else that you've raised, or you've spoken about in your questionnaire, is about air pressures.
Yes.
Moving on to page 239. It's question H, halfway down the page. The question there was recording you emailing David Wilson of Brookfield in December 2015, stating that the pressure in the isolation room is presenting an unacceptable risk to vulnerable patients present within these protective environments. Now, the suggestion in the question is that was an email from you.
Yes.
In fact, on reflection, I understand that might instead have been an email from Mr. Powry. Can you recall one way or the other?
No, I think I sent the email to David Wilson.
In any event, you're certainly aware of the issue.
I was aware of the issue, yeah.
Can you describe to me what the issue was, please?
I think the pressures weren't as what they should have been. I can't remember what the pressures were for those rooms, but they weren't. And I think the ward staff either contacted me or I got to know about it and I went up and concurred with the staff. They weren't right. So at that point, I don't know whether we had checked out the system ourselves and were finding that we couldn't resolve it. But I contacted David, and to be fair, he came across and with a look at it. I can't exactly remember what was done, but I think it was resolved.
Are you able to explain to me what's the importance of air pressure in isolation rooms?
Well, I think it's positive pressure rooms, so they've got to be. So the room is room within the pressure within the room. It pushes out into the corridor, so it's not the other way around. So I think it's just for the type of patient that's in the room. It needs to be at a certain level for them to get better.
How did you come to be aware that the air pressure was at the wrong level?
That's what I'm saying. I think the ward staff contacted me. I don't know how it was, but I think I got somebody made me aware of it, and I went up to the ward
Do you know how the ward staff became aware of it?
Well, there's an alarm system on the ward that'll flag it up at the. There's a gauge right outside the door of each room. There's also an alarm system, so if it goes below a certain level, it'll alarm.
You told us the matter was resolved once you got contractors in
Yeah,
to sort that.
I can't remember what they did, but they must have done something back at the plant. I don't know, but it was resolved.
And do you happen to know what the cause was? Was it anything to do with the functioning of seals in the rooms, for example?
No, I'm not sure that the seals in that particular room were the issue. I'm not sure. Because if that were the case, it would have happened more than once. It would have, you know.
As for what was actually the cause, do you know?
I'm not sure of the cause, but I don't recall it being seals in that room that needed to be done. Otherwise, we could have done that ourselves in-house. If we'd noticed a gap or something like that, we could have sorted that. So it was more than that, I think.
Right. This was part of question 175, and it's a long question. I'm not going to take it through you piece by piece. But there are a number of issues where you don't appear to have been cited of or appear to have known about absence of HEPA filters, air change rates, fungal growth, and so on. Do you recall this question, or do you want to look at it?
No, whereabouts is it in the document?
Sorry, let's do it properly then. For example, 238, back one page where it starts. Question B is asking about general concerns around lack of HEPA filters. And your answer is you weren't included in the emails and have no knowledge of this.
That's correct.
And then we have at page 240. M, towards the foot of the page, is asking about fungal growth. And you say you've had no involvement with that.
Correct.
And then back over at 239, there is the issue of air change rates at question G, halfway down the page. The suggestion being made there is that air change rates was an issue that was raised with you, but you don't recall that.
I don't recall that, and as I say, I got on very well with Dr. Peters and the team. So if she'd raised something with me, it would have registered with me, and I would have investigated and reported back. I just don't recall that. Yeah.
On 2 pages at 241. The question there at 176, 2/3 of the way down the page, is what level of awareness should an estates manager and authorised person for ventilation have of ventilation issues? And you've said estates managers, which you were one, and authorised persons will have good awareness for ventilation issues as they arise. 2, presumably be able to direct staff in the appropriate course of action to repair. I wonder, can you just explain to me how you reconcile that with the fact that there seem to be many issues that arose to do with ventilation that you weren't aware of?
Yeah, I wasn't aware that there were a lot of ventilation issues that were brought to my attention. I think everything was going generally all right. If it needed to be brought to my attention, then it was. And if I needed to escalate that up to Ian, I would. So I just don't. Generally, the ventilation systems worked well. That's my experience.
Do you consider that in your role as a senior estates manager that you ought to have had more citing or more awareness of the issues as they were arising?
Are you referring to any specific issue or just generally?
General. Yes,
I think possibly, as I say, I think they knew the pressure I was under and maybe didn't want to, this is my colleagues below me, they dealt with most matters, and if it needed to come to me, it would. And as I say, I was a pretty busy guy at that hospital. I was had my work cut out on a number of fronts. So if I needed to know about it, they would share it with me.
In general, you're relying on others to bring to you things that
Yes, I am.
they thought you needed to know.
Yes, and likewise, I would push that up to Ian if I felt he needed to know about something.
In looking back, do you consider that to have been satisfactory?
Yes, because I had confidence in the guys below me. They were very good, very competent, and they probably the better awareness of the site than I did overall. And as I say, they were pretty good at doing their job, duty managers.
Okay, that brings to an end that particular section of questions, and we're almost at 11:30, my lord. So,
Mr. Brattey, as I've said, we usually take coffee break at about 11:30. So could I ask you to be back for 10 to 12?
Yes,
You'll be taken to the witness room.
okay, thank you.
Please stand.
Ms. McKee.
Thank you. My next section of questions was about chilled beams. We've covered chilled beams in a bit of detail already. But one thing we didn't cover was what, in actual fact, they are. Can you give me, in brief terms, your understanding of what a chilled beam is, how it works?
Well, to be fair, up until that point, I'd never seen a chilled beam before. So, to working in the Queen Elizabeth, I think it's just it's almost like a radiator in the ceiling. There's no real moving parts, and that's a kind of deemed as a benefit to that type of installation because it's silent and it's running. So it's just pipework coming through the hospital linked to that, and with fins that project heat or cooling into the room.
In general terms, you've mentioned in your questionnaire one or two incidents that arose around chilled beams, but in general terms, do you recall whether there was a concern about their use within the hospital?
No, not a general concern, no.
And indeed, you've mentioned the possible advantages of them in the statement. You say about noise, about low maintenance, that sort of thing.
Yes, yes.
Question 40 and 49 are on page 199. And that's where I was taking it from about question 49. You mentioned low maintenance, no moving parts, and quieter. Then at question 50, there was the question we looked at earlier about the frequency of the cleaning regime that became necessary.
Yes.
Now, the regime that was originally envisaged there at your answer was annual cleaning.
Yes.
Would that have been one of the tasks that was allocated via the PPM system?
Yes.
And for how long did you subject the chilled beams to annual cleaning via PPM?
Once, I think.
Once.
Once.
And you told us that it became obvious on eyesight that was not enough.
Yes. I think the users, more than I did, they realised, and both in infection control, Dr. Inkster, Dr. Peters, they noticed that they were becoming dirtier more quickly, and I had to sort of try and remedy that.
What reached you first, the instruction to do the annual PPM or the indication that there were people who had become unhappy off their own bat?
That's hard to say. That first year just disappeared, so I don't know if it was one or the other. I'm not sure about that. What triggered it first?
Over the page at 200, at the top is question 51, where you're mentioning a specific event that you recall, a problem with chilled beams. And you mentioned there a dripping chilled beam in wards 2A. Could you tell us about that incident, please?
Well, I think that was, just as it says there, it was a drip. Water was dripping and it was coming through a ceiling tile and it was dripping onto the floor. This was in a general area within the ward. And I think we had to investigate that. So again, we had to get I think we had to go through infection control there because to investigate it, you've got to take the ceiling tile down to get above the ceiling tile. So, you don't want just to be doing that in that type of ward without good cause.
Is that the sort of work that high scribe would be necessary?
High scribe would definitely come into it in that ward 2A.
Which ward was it? Sorry, you say it's ward 2A. When was that event? Can you recall?
Oh, I think that was hard to say now. Probably early on, maybe late 15 or early 16. Hard to say, but maybe within the first year of occupation. And what we found was that the coil, the pipe work to the actual coil coupling had come loose or cracked or something, and water was dripping at that point.
So water was actually dripping out of the
fitting onto the tile, which then the tile was soaked, and then that water had penetrated the tile and dripping onto the floor.
Okay, so lest I be distracted by the sub-question B that's 8 lines down there that refers to dew point controls. This wasn't a condensation issue that you're talking about. This was water coming from within the beams and dripping out of the beams. Is that correct?
The pipework that connected, the pipework came along and then it was physically connected into the, I don't know if it was a flexible connection, there was some kind of connection from the pipework to the coil, and it was the coupling there that was cracked or something, and water was dripping from the coupling, not from the beam, not from the pipework, but the coupling dripping onto the tile.
But if we think about chilled beams as having an internal water system, like as any radiator would do, are you talking about water coming out of that internal system and dripping down, rather than, in the case of condensation, water coming from the atmosphere?
It wasn't condensation, it was the physical coupling that linked the pipework to the beam.
Yes.
Was broken, and water was dripping from that.
Okay, thank you. And you saw this for yourself?
I did.
What was done about it?
It was repaired. I think we did that in-house. We repaired it. But a new coupling in or something like that was something that we could do. I'm sure we did that. I don't recall involving Brookfield in that. I think we did that.
Thank you.
But I actually think Dr. Inkster came in there at that point, or she was involved in that, and she wanted to see that because she's in and out of that ward all the time. So I think she wanted to stick her head. I'm sure she asked me, David, can you arrange to get a ladder and a torch? I want to have a look at that. And I'm positive she came in there and we got that for her to see that personally.
Okay. I'm going to take you to a document just now. It's at bundle 12, page 821. And we see this is the start of an email chain, and it's dated July 2016. And if we look at the email, I'll read out the first part to you. From Jean Kirkwood, had reported to estates last night that discoloured water had dripped down from the ventilation onto the floor next to a patient's bed. Estates met with us in Ward 2A to review the issue. In Ward 2A, 4 single rooms, not BMT, are affected, but not all to the same degree. Now, is this the same incident that you were talking about before, or is this a different incident?
No, the incident I'm referring to was out in the corridor near the nurses station. I think, I'm sure it wasn't in any rooms, it was out in a general area.
Okay, thank you. And again, to emphasise that, if we read on, each non-BMT room in Ward 2A has a chill beam in the ceiling and in front of it a ventilation grille. Due to excessive heat, air condensed on the beam and dripped onto the grille, then onto the floor. Unfortunately, the grilles have not been subject to ppm and some are thick with stour. This turned the water black as it dripped down. So this would be a condensation issue that's being discussed, is that right?
Okay. I wasn't involved in that next part. I don't think I was. I was very rarely in that ward, to be fair. In my time at the Queen Elizabeth, I tended to be in the adult hospital.
Okay, well,
So is that the HAS grade?
just to, we'll come on to the later part and a question I'll ask you in a moment. But just to emphasise the point, I mentioned 2 alternatives before, rather overemphasise them perhaps, but the first issue that you described to me was water coming from inside the system and dripping down. That was the one that you said, I think, was in the corridor. Was that right?
Yes, that's correct.
But this incident that we're reading about now is a completely different type of dripping. This is condensation forming and dripping down.
Yeah.
And the particular problem, a particular additional problem that I read out was that the water was being dirtied on its progress downwards.
Mhm.
So underlined midway down that block of text is in a state's plan, sealing up the room from inside, remove the grill, vacuum and wash, clean the beam, clean materials, remove seals, deep clean. Ward 2A are keen to get those rooms into action ASAP. They need all 4 rooms cleaned over the next 2 days. After that, they need a PPM for all the grills. Not all grills seem to have the same level of stour, dust in RHC, but it will be worth doing a review of which rooms have them in which wards so they can be part of the PPM. And then Ms. Unitas says, I have agreed this with the acting lead ICD, SCN and Estates brackets David Brattey and will write it up. Do you recall this?
I'm not sure that I do. It was indicating that I was going to write it up, or was it Pamela Joannidis was going to write it up?
As I read it, it's about agreeing matters with you, among others, and that Ms. Unitas would write it up herself.
Yeah, I mean, I don't recall specifically, but if I was part of it, then I would have done my part.
Do you recall this specific incident?
No, I don't recall. I don't recall it. No.
Elsewhere in the statement, and I don't think I need to take you to this, you've described PPM work as reactive. Could you explain what you meant by that, please?
Me saying it was reactive. Whereabouts was this?
Well, in the statement, we were on, I think, page 200, if I was right from the statement. If we go back to that, the answer I had in mind is C, midway down that page.
Okay.
And this is referring in general to issues with dust collecting on the chilled beam units. The question put to you, do you consider PPM to be reactive rather than proactive? And you said initially PPM was reactive as there were so many chilled beams to be cleaned.
Yes, I stand by that.
Could you explain to me just what you had in mind, what you meant when you say reactive?
Well, we're just cleaning as people mentioned to us that a particular chill beam was dirty and that we needed to clean it. So that's what was meant by that. You know, so there was just so many that we just I think it just came to be known that one was particularly dirty. We need to clean it, and that's what I think was what I meant when was being reactive. But we had the PPM in place, but maybe the yearly frequency. Well, I'm sure the yearly frequency was too long and had to be brought in. But
did you bring it in, or did you continue reacting as particular incidents were brought to your attention?
Sorry, say again, please.
If it was set down for standard annual cleaning,
yes.
Did you bring it into 6 months, 3 months cleaning, or did you alternatively respond to incidents one by one as they were brought to your attention?
I think we did respond one by one. I don't know how short we could have brought it in, because there's 1,100 rooms in that hospital with chilled beams in it. How do you, if you brought it into a 3 monthly frequency, how could you get round 1,100 rooms in 3 months? I just don't know how that could have been done. So getting into a room to clean a chilled beam was access was always an issue. You just because you had to have the room free. Everyone had to be out whilst you were in. So that was always an issue. So you just you can only clean one room at a time.
Well, in relation to that, does it follow from that the sheer number of rooms in the hospital was itself a problem?
Yes.
And you'll be aware the hospital proceeded on a single occupancy room basis.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have views on that?
Obviously, it's great for the patient. You know, if you have a single room, you know, you get better quicker than if you're in a communal ward. But from a maintenance point of view, yeah, it was difficult. We could we could know that we're going into a ward to clean a room or whatever it is, and everything's set up the day before. We're all set to do it. And I've spoken to the nurse in the ward, the charge nurse, and said, right, we're in tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Yeah, that's fine, David, no problem. My guys turn up at 8 o'clock in the morning and the room is filled. I get on to the guy, the charge nurse, and I said, what's going on? We agreed. We had an emergency during the night, we had to fill the room. So that happened more often than not. So getting into the rooms to clean was a real challenge. I don't know how it's been done today, but back then it was a challenge.
Thank you. Before I leave the ventilation questions, I just want to go back to one point around carrying out verification of the theatres. And I think I certainly, we got confused a little bit between the words validation and verification.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked you if you had seen validation records at the time that you were carrying out verification work in the theatres, and you indicated that you had.
Yes.
If we've heard from other witnesses that there were no validation records in relation to ventilation system, what would you say about that?
I'd be surprised because, as I say, for the validation, when we realised that the HEPA filters were failing, I was able to go to the document in the estates office, pull out the file and look at the validation figures that were there from the period of installation. So I was able to check with what happened a year ago against what's happening today. So I thought
We've heard different terms being used. We've heard commissioning, which is something, if I've understood it, is carried out by the contractor to check whether a particular item is working. And we've heard about validation, again, which, if I'm following it, is something carried out on behalf of the client, the health board, and is looking at the whole system. Now, when you're talking about going to the estates office and finding paper documents, for example, in relation to HEPA filters, can you give me an idea of who has prepared these documents and for what purpose?
I don't know. I don't know the answer. It was just a documentation and relating to that theatre of what went on at installation. So I don't know whether that was Brookfield or whether it was a specialist contractor. It was just that I could relate to figures at the outset, and I could see that we were not achieving those standards at the verification, and that's what led us to believe that the HEPA filters were faulty. So I don't. So verification is the annual process.
Yes.
Validation or commissioning is, I just took it as validation as being the initial set of figures at the outset.
Relating to specific items of plant?
Yes, relating to the ventilation system or the air handling unit supplying to that particular theatre, ever in relation to that.
And the document, I mean, you say you weren't achieving the rates.
The flow rates get into the theatre.
Documentation would identify the air change rates, or
Yes, it's something like that. My Lord, it's just your initial documentation. But I don't know who signed that off, but that was there for me to relate to for verification checks. So it's hard to explain it. But
I mean, it's always difficult to explain a document if you don't have
one
it in
set of
front of you.
documents at the outset, and I didn't see these documents at the outset. I don't know whether they were handed over to us, but once we started the verification process, I could just put my hand in that file, pull it out, and look at the figures in relation to when it was installed and commissioned, and could see that we were not achieving that at the verification, and that's what led to the HEPA filters needing to be changed.
Okay, so it was the actual words that I was focusing on beforehand. Might it be that these were commissioning documents rather than validation documents that you were looking at?
Yeah, could be. Yes.
Okay. Now, moving on to water matters, your duties also involved you working with the water system in the Queen Elizabeth. You told us about that at the very outset. Now, just a couple of specific water matters I'd like to ask you about. The first one related to authorised persons for water. Were you ever an authorised person or a responsible person for the water
I
system?
don't
at
think
QH?
it was.
Do you recall that there was at some point a suggestion that Tommy Romeo might take on the role of authorised person?
I don't remember that, to be honest. I don't recall that. Who was that? No, I don't recall that.
Okay.
He was electrical as well, so I'm not, although that shouldn't make any difference, but no, I don't recall that.
Okay. The second matter relates to later on in the statement at page 227. You're discussing the board water group at this point in the statement. And it's at the top of the page, you mention that the purpose of the group is to commission and develop a water safety policy, water safety plan, including a risk assessment. And at the bottom of the page, at question F, you're asked to explain any issues discussed by reference to the water safety group bundle that you referred to. And you mention in your answer discussions around water safety plans, schemes and audits, Legionella sampling bacteria within the shower heads, and bloodstream infections. And then over the page at G, at 228, please. You're asked to what extent any of that was within your remit within estates. And your answer there is it wasn't within your remit within estates. However, you've been aware through discussions with Ian Powrie, you do recall meeting with Viola along with Ian regarding a new water plant for renal dialysis and also meeting a representative from one of the showerhead companies. And you believe that you purchased a batch of disposable showerheads. Now, taking those two answers together, can I ask you, what do you recall about the bacteria that were found in the showerheads? Do you recall what they were?
I don't recall that. I don't recall that particular thing.
And as regards any sampling that was done at the time, do you recall anything about the results of that sampling, what was done with them?
No, sorry, I don't recall that.
Were you involved in doing the sampling at all?
I don't think so. I don't recall it. Specific sample, no.
Moving back to page 207. The context here is different. It's about testing and maintenance of the water system. But question 79, you're asked about what testing and maintenance protocols and regimes were in place. And you mention SHTM 2077 and 0401, which is the water guidance, is that right?
Yes.
So in short, your answer here is that what was done was carried out in accordance with that guidance. Can I ask what happened after the testing was done? Specifically, where were testing results recorded?
Yes, they were recorded.
Where would they be recorded?
It would be on a pro forma sheet that would be made up, and then it'd be held in the estates office or the supervisor's office. Yeah, they'd be held as a hard copy.
Did you carry out any testing yourself?
No.
Who did the testing?
The technician staff would be doing the testing. They're the trained operatives.
Were the tests brought, were the results brought to you to examine them?
Not always. If there was an issue or something like that, it would be brought to my attention. I don't recall many issues there at all. I knew it was being done, and there was a logbook there that I could go and look at if I needed to.
How would you go about analysing whether there was an issue that needed attention?
Well, as I say, it would probably be brought to me, and then we would investigate. You know, I'd go and have a look at it. The supervisor or the technician. I mean, generally, they would get involved first, and then if it needed to come to me, it would come to me. It would go through the duty manager, and then if they felt I needed to see it or whatever, or investigate further, then we would.
Again, are you reliant upon people below you deciding
am.
this was something you needed to know about?
I am, yeah, and I had full confidence in the team below me. They were very competent. They were very good. They got on with the work, and
if you looked at the results and decided, yes, there is an issue, then what happened?
we would remedy it. We would try and see what the issue was, and we would get work lines created to repair or sort out what the issue was. Timely, we would do that imminently.
Would you refer matters to anyone else?
No.
And finally, this is largely for completeness at page 220. Really for clarification, question 117 is reference to things being done with DMA Canyon in 2017. And you say that, I don't think you were involved with that, but in 2017 you were involved in getting a workshop built within plant room 33 to test thermostatic mixing taps en masse.
Yes.
Might it have been the case that rather than testing, that this workshop was designed to clean taps?
Clean. Yes. Clean.
Do you know why this was happening?
Well, it was to do a number of taps at the one time. We had this stainless steel sink arrangement that was, I think, purchased right at the outset of the hospital. I don't know where it came from, but that was always going to be installed into a location that we could find within the hospital that could allow this to happen. So that's what that was. It was to allow to put, I think, four sets of taps hooked up to this pipework and then be tested through with hot water to flush it through to make sure it was all stuff. And it was to do multiple taps at the one time. And then they would go into stock as being deemed fit for purpose. And then we would change them over as required. So that kicked off in 2017. It was tricky. It was trying to find a suitable location within the hospital, but plant room 33 was the biggest plant room in the hospital. So we managed to get a location there where it was fairly close to the hot water services and the like. So
okay.
It started in late 17, as I said. I think when I left in 18, it was pretty close to being completed, but I'm not sure that it was up and running by the time I left.
Okay, thank you. That question arises. That's part of a longer section about questions relating to DMA Canyon. I'm going to come on to that just now. If we go back, to page 216, please, that should be where it starts. So you'll see here that this is where the questionnaire starts discussing the DMA Canyon 2015 report. Now, you're familiar with that report, I think.
Yes, I saw it at the time, I think, and I haven't really seen it since then. I had a quick look at it this morning. I was unable to download that from my question stuff in the bundles. I found it difficult to download information without my iPad crashing. So I had a look at the document this morning before I could come in.
I'll take it to you very briefly in a moment, but over the page at 217, question 111 is about a meeting. Our investigations indicate you attended a meeting with DMA Canyon, Ian Powrie and James Guthrie following Ian Powrie's receipt of the DMA Canyon report. That should be in 2015. Do you recall this meeting?
Yes, I think I was there. I mean, I was obviously there. I don't know the exact date, but it must have been soon after the report was received. That's.
Do you recall where it was?
It would have been in the estates office. It was probably in Ian's office.
Can you recall what was discussed?
The report, just the report in general.
You remember what was said about it?
No, I can't really recall what was said of it, but obviously there's maybe actions required. But I just can't remember exactly what was said.
Okay, I'll come back to the report in a moment, but first, perhaps a slight tangent. 3 pages further on, at question 119, there was a specific suggestion put to you that infection control were only advised about the 2015 report in 2018, and you're asked why were they not told sooner what happened. Your answer there was, I don't know why they were only advised in 2018. I thought they would have known about it sooner as they attended meetings within the estate's office on a regular basis. Now, are you indicating that the 2015 report was discussed at those meetings between estates and infection control?
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. I just assumed they would have known about that report. I can't understand how they wouldn't have known about it, because infection control were a kind of an integral part of these meetings. So I just can't understand how they didn't know about it.
Sorry, it's entirely my fault. You're referring to meetings involving people from infection prevention and control.
Yes.
Now, my fault, Mr. McKeever, but I'm just not keeping up with this. When did are you talking about regular meetings?
Yes, I thought we had regular meetings, and there was always an infection control presence. Like it wouldn't necessarily be the senior person there, but an infection control nurse was generally at these meetings. I'm sure that was the case. So that's what I can remember. It was just.
So you're referring to your memory of a regular meeting in which you were present at, and an infection prevention and control nurse.
Yes, I think I think that those kind of meetings were chaired, or like the general manager was there, or somebody from, general manager estates was there, Ian Powrie was there, I was there, other estates officers were there. I'm sure there was infection control were at these meetings as well. Was it? An infection control nurse back there. That's what I can remember.
And also in your memory, are these meetings at which the 2015 report was being discussed?
Sorry, where's that, please?
I'm not referring to the statement at this point.
Sorry.
Inferring from, or trying to draw out your answer, really.
Yes.
At these regular meetings that in your memory, are these meetings at which the 2015 report would have been expressly discussed?
Yeah, I think it would have been. I can't remember. Just think that the meetings were regular. There was loads of things discussed at these meetings. I'm not sure they were just particularly relating to water, but that's what I can remember. I didn't attend all these meetings, by the way. If I was, I attended a lot of them, but I didn't attend every single one. So.
Is your memory in any event that the 2015 DMA report would have been a regular subject to discourse in the state's offices among the estates team?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now, the specific meeting I started off asking about was the one that you'd referred to where you, James Guthrie and DMA Canyon had been together. We've heard from Ian Powrie, and the reference here is page 59 of his transcript, my lord. Ian Powrie had said that he had expected, following that meeting, that you and Mr Guthrie would come back to him with a written scheme or action plan to have been populated with the points that DMA had raised in the report.
Mhm.
Do you accept that?
If he asked us to do that, then yes.
And he also indicated that you and Mr Guthrie did prepare the bones of such a scheme or plan, but he'd lost sight of it. Do you recall doing that?
Don't recall doing a specific thing, but I know that Jim Guthrie worked well with me in that. And I just can't remember. I'm sure we would have provided Ian with something, but I can't recall all the ins and outs of it. So
I'd just like to be clear on what you actually recall and what you are surmising from what other people have said. Can you recall being tasked with preparing a scheme to tackle the 2015 DMA recommendations?
I cannot recall being asked to do that specifically from. I don't recall that coming down as an instruction.
Can you recall actually doing it or starting to do it?
Oh, I can't remember exactly what would have been instructed for me to do, but had I been instructed, I would have done it. You know, so I'm not just not done it. I would have done it. If he'd asked me to do something, I would have done it. It's as simple as that.
Right, we can perhaps look at the report if we need to, but in general terms, the report contained a long list of in terms of the water system. Is that, in general terms, your understanding?
I think there was some stuff that needed to be done. Yeah.
You can't recall being tasked with doing that stuff?
No.
To select an example of what that sort of stuff might have been, could we look at the report itself? It's at bundle 6, page 122. And if we go over as an example to the top of page 138, you'll see here the first box is about dealing with domestic hot and cold water outlets. And just to read the first paragraph as an example, distribution temperatures in domestic water systems recorded by DMA have largely replicated those provided to DMA on ZUTEC for the commissioning phase, and those being recorded by state staff. Cold water temperatures recorded by DMA vary considerably, with the majority being more than 5 degrees higher than those recorded at the water tanks, and with peak temperatures of 30 degrees being noted. Additional control measures such as flushing, disinfections, background dosing should be implemented until such times as area department fully occupied, storage and distribution temperatures and microbiological results are consistently satisfactory. Now, you've told us earlier this morning that you were aware of guidance, including the L8 guidance.
Mm-hmm.
That's Legionella guidance, is that correct?
Yes.
And are you aware as part of that that temperature is an important factor when it relates to Legionella? So the passage I've just read out, is that the sort of thing that concerned you at the time in 2015 when the report was issued?
Yes, it probably did. 30 degrees is too high for cold water.
What did you do about that?
I don't know what I particularly did about that, but I know that we'd probably have to flush the tanks out to get the temperature down. Bring fresh water in to get it to 20 degrees or less.
What I mean is, what I'm getting at is that given your background knowledge of water systems, of Legionella, of the risks posed by high temperatures, and given that you had discussed this report, a passage such as this that raises a specific problem in relation to temperatures, is that the sort of thing that ought to have provoked you to do something?
Probably, yeah.
And did you do anything?
I don't know. I can't remember back to that particular. I must have done something. I must have. We couldn't have just sat and said that was fine. Let's just go along with that. We must have done something about it, but you know.
The meetings that you're recalling, whether that's the first meeting with Mr. Powdery and Mr. Guthrie, or the later ones relating to involving infection control and so on, where you recall the report being discussed? Were points such as this brought up?
I can't remember what happened at these meetings, but I'm sure major points like this would have been brought up. We would have been discussing this. I'm sure we would have been doing that. That's what the meetings were all about. But I mean, it's 9 years ago. I can't remember exactly.
And are you aware of any specific action having been taken by you or anyone else
No, I can't
with regard
remember.
to this temperature issue?
No, I can't remember exactly.
If we go back to your statement, (217), you'll recall, was where questioning 111 started. And at the foot of that page, at Roman 4 IV, is the question I put to you earlier, did you have a responsibility to develop an action plan?
Sorry, what question is that?
2/3 of the way down the page, IV, in respect of the DNA Canyon meeting. You see that?
Oh, yeah.
With Ian Powdery and Jim Guthrie, did you have a responsibility to develop an action plan? You said you don't think so.
Yeah, I stand by that. I don't know whether I did. I was asked to do that or not. I just can't remember. If I was, I would have done it.
And I mentioned something about bare bones of the plan. Might have been the case that the bare bones were done by DMA.
Well, DMA were back on site on a number of occasions, but I can't remember. But certainly.
And if that were the case, then when it came to populating an action plan with actual details of work to be carried out, can you recall being tasked with doing that?
I can't recall being tasked with doing anything regarding that, but if I was, I would have done it. It's as simple as that.
Would you have taken any action on your own initiative to sort out any of the points raised in the report?
I honestly can't remember. I really don't recall that, doing stuff like that. As I say, I'm sure if actions were pushed down in my direction, I would have carried it out.
So does it follow from that you wouldn't see it as your own responsibility to tackle this report without someone telling you to do that?
No. It was just such a busy. I'm going to go back to say I was such a busy person on that site that I had my hands full.
Over the page at 218, there are further questions about the action plan, or the first two. In IX, what works, if any, do you recall carrying out? And you've said there you don't recall being asked to carry out any works in 2015. But you make reference to minutes from November 2017 and a written scheme underway then. It's question X at the foot that I'm interested in. Because the question there is that we understand that you gave verbal feedback to Ian Powdery that the works were being carried out. Do you agree with this? If so, what works were carried out by and when in respect of the 2015 report? You said again there you don't recall what piece of work I was asked to do. However, if Ian Powdery said I gave him verbal feedback, then I must have done so. what do you understand? In that question, it makes reference to works were being carried out. What do you understand the question to be asking there? What works is it referring to?
I do not know. I don't know what work it has been referred to. I don't know whether it's the getting that installation started. I don't know if it was that or not. But
So in your answer, you're prepared to accept that take Ian Powrie's word,
absolutely,
but in actual fact, you don't know what that word was about.
no.
Moving on to page 220, your question 118. The question there's a short one. What was the impact of any of the failure to implement the 2015 recommendations on patient safety? And you've said you don't think there was any impact. You see that?
Yes.
Now, in light of the passage I read to you about water temperatures rising up to 30 degrees in some cases, would you consider that to be a safety issue?
Yes, if it's above 20 degrees, it's not ideal.
So setting aside or taking account of the fact that you don't appear to be able to recall which, if any, works were done in 2015 or thereafter in response to the report, the hypothesis that the question is predicated upon is that there was a failure to implement the recommendations that were in the report. Would you accept that if one of the recommendations was, for example, bring the temperatures down, and that wasn't done, then that must have an impact on patient safety?
Yes, I would agree with that, but I'm sure that we would have acted on the high temperatures and did bring them down. I can't believe we would have left them there at 30 degrees.
Now, just moving on from this particular report, or just before we do you recall ever seeing a quote from DMA to carry out these works?
No.
If there had been a quote given, would it have been within your responsibility to approve a quote like that?
It could have been. It could have been Ian's. It would have fallen to me to authorise it. I would have. If it was within my remit to authorise it, I would have authorised it and got the work done.
But you don't recall ever seeing such a quote?
I don't recall that. I think, to be fair, I think Ian was dealing a lot with DMA Canyon, getting them on site and things like that. When they came on site, they would always put their head into my office and say, "We're on site, David," or whatever it was. But I don't really recall bringing them onto site myself. I think it was Ian that kind of did that generally.
Thank you. Could I bring up another document, please? It's the next one in that bundle. Bundle 6 at page 416 is the 2017 DMA, their second risk assessment. I think we've got it clear that you simply can't recall what work, or if any work, was done in relation to the 2015 report prior to 2017. Would that be fair?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. Sorry, what question are we on? Sorry, that's just the...
I'll take you to page 597, please, of this bundle just now, because it's one specific example of something recorded within this report. It's a gap analysis meeting which you're recorded as being present in January of 2018. Do you recall that meeting with DMA then?
No, I don't recall specifically that. I mean, I was, although I was there, that was the end of January 2018.
So just to look at a couple of points from it, then in the paragraph, second paragraph in the main text, where it states have advised.
Oh,
You see that?
yes, I'm reading that.
Where it says have advised tasks have been completed, records have not been made available for inspection by the time of issue. We would advise these are made available to establish the level of compliance achieved where tasks are being completed.
Uh-huh.
So what's been noted here is that there's not enough evidence, in short, for DMA to satisfy themselves that what needed to be done has been done.
Right.
Is that your reading of it?
That must be the case, yeah.
Are you aware of whether that was addressed subsequently?
No, because after that I was only in a handful of days for the remainder of the year. When it came into February 18, I was on a 3-day week at that point, and I still had holidays to take, so I was only in for 7 or 8, 9 days in February. I can't honestly remember if I was part of that ongoing thing in February.
Okay, well, 2 paragraphs below that, we've got a different issue. The estates manager placed in the role of AP Water has not undergone any training in Legionella control or other bacteria and has limited knowledge of the water systems on site and the requirements of the guidance.
Yes.
Are you aware of who that was?
No, I don't. No, I don't know.
Was that a matter of concern to you when it was discussed?
Well, I'm sure they were actively trying to get an AP up to speed, but I don't know who it was. I don't know whether it was, as you say, maybe either Tommy Romeo or others. But yeah, we needed to get the AP in place as soon as possible.
In the paragraph below that, it's unclear which responsibilities lie with which departments and to which persons within these departments. It's also unclear which responsibilities lie with site estates and which lie with the NHS GGC compliance team. That's an observation more on the state of things within governing the water system at the time. Would you agree with that assessment?
Well, to be honest, I didn't know about the NHS compliance team. I didn't know how that was made up.
The essence of the paragraph, as I read it, is that the concern is it's simply unclear who has responsibility for what.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something you would agree with?
Yes, I would agree with that.
And was that a matter of concern to you, given you were still part of the team at that point?
Yes, it would have been a concern, yeah.
And below that, there's a paragraph about written scheme guidance issued in 2015, though not as updated as anticipated to be fully utilised as a written scheme for site and become the overarching control document for Legionella control. And it notes that a general written scheme has been issued, but that there's DMA are awaiting feedback and there's a draft document out for discussion at the moment. Firstly, are you aware of the significance of a written scheme for the water system?
Yeah.
Do you know whether one was put in place subsequently to this meeting?
I don't know. There was.
The last sentence on that page would describe the Legionella management on site as being high risk until remedial actions highlighted within the Legionella risk assessment and within this gap analysis are implemented. It's clear from that, would you agree with me, that DMA are highly concerned here that the Legionella position is not satisfactory?
Yep.
And was that a matter of concern to you at the time?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, we wanted to go from red to green as we wanted everything to be absolutely fine.
Had it been a concern to you over the previous 2 years?
Yes, it probably was. Yeah, it was. But as I say, I I was not solely honed in on the water. I was just doing 101 other things, and that just bypassed me, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I understand that, but looking back on it with hindsight, is this the sort of thing that you should have been doing something about?
Yes.
And in relation to this specific meeting, would you agree with me that DMA must have been expecting that things would have been done
Yes.
after this?
Yes.
Did you do anything in response to it
From
from
30th of
January 2018?
No,
Because
I was practically not there for the next 2 months.
now, setting that to one side, what was and is your reaction when you read a sentence such as this last one?
Disappointed that we have not actioned or done what we needed to do, and it had taken such a long time for DMA then to highlight it on a second occasion. I think that's not good, not ideal.
Okay, thank you. My last set of questions is about something completely different, about pigeons.
Yes.
Were you aware of a pigeon presence at the Queen Elizabeth?
Yes.
When did you become aware?
I was aware when I joined, when I went to the Southern General in 2014.
How did you become aware?
They were everywhere. They were everywhere. They were getting into attics in the old buildings. They were contaminating that. They were everywhere. They were getting into the lab block where my office was. They were coming in through the loading bay. They were everywhere.
Were you aware of them as an infection risk?
Yeah.
Are you aware of something called cryptococcus?
I know what that is now. I didn't come across that at the time. But
when you moved over to Queen Elizabeth in April 2015, how long did it take you to appreciate that there was a pigeon problem there as well?
I'm not sure. I think people were just saying to me, David, I think there's pigeon droppings in some of the plant rooms, and I said, right, okay, I'll deal with that. I'll get the company out, and yeah, it wasn't maybe right away, but certainly after, as we moved on, it just became more apparent that there were more of them getting in everywhere.
How frequently did this come across your sight, your mind, to your attention?
It was regular. I knew I had the pest protection company out on a regular basis. They were everywhere, as I say, and some of the exposed, with a plant room on top of the children's hospital, which really didn't have a kind of a roof on it. It was all extract systems that were just open to the elements, and pigeon droppings in that area were just horrendous.
Did you report this to anyone else?
I think everybody in the whole of the estates, the hierarchy, knew that there was a pigeon problem. It wasn't just, I didn't need to report it to anybody, they all knew.
Now, you mentioned that you actually took some action about this.
I did. I was the one that was. I dealt with the contractor. I called him out. I walked the job with him. I said, "This needs to be cleaned. We need to find these birds and get them out. The ones that were still alive. Some ended up dead, lying on the floor. We had to get them out. Get the room totally cleaned. But they were back in again. You know, they were getting in. I don't know how the heck they were getting in, but they were not getting. Folks said either getting in through openable doors. Well, that just was not happening, because these doors out from the plant rooms were. You had to open them, unlock them from the inside, and open them out against a heavy door closer. There is no way that pigeons were getting in at the point those doors were open, but they were getting in some other way.
You mentioned plant rooms as one of the locations where there was a pigeon problem. What was in those plant rooms?
Air handling units, everything, water, pumps, everything to do with running the hospital, equipment there, distribution pipe work, electrical cables, everything was in those plant rooms. They were getting in, and they tended to nest on high level stuff. So the cable trays at high level, they were nesting in that. And
When you say they're getting in, are they getting into the equipment that's inside?
no, they're
or
not getting into
rooms?
the equipment, but they could be fouling some of the equipment. You know, their droppings landing on equipment, but not getting into equipment, if that makes sense.
What's specifically your concerns about this?
Possible, you know, infection maybe further down the line, but we just had to get these pigeons out and get the area cleaned.
What work did that create for you?
Involving the pest protection contractor to come in and remove these birds and then clean up the room.
Okay, we can look at what's likely to be the last documents, bundle 24, volume 1 at page 83. Now you referred to getting a contractor in, and here's a report from GP Environmental, works requested by David Brattey in the second row of the boxes there. And the date is 24th of March 2017. Is this the instruction that you're talking about, having got pest control in?
That would have been one of them, as I say. We had pest protection were in on a fairly regular basis.
When they came in, would there always be a report like this, or is this report indicative of
I think
the
they
start of the relationship?
they would do a report. They would tell me verbally what they'd done, and I would probably go up with them and say, right, let me have a look, make sure everything's okay, and then something would follow. A report would follow up, a follow-up report rather. But generally, I would go up. I wanted to be satisfied myself that the room had been cleared.
Was there anything specific that prompted you to get pest control out? Or was it simply everything that you saw prompted it to happen?
Well, I don't think we were qualified, or any of us could competent to clean. You know, we didn't have cleaners as such. We didn't have experts in that field. So, pest protection with a team to get out and get the birds out and clean up.
Okay, so just to conclude by looking at the report, paragraph 1A is summarising what you've told us. Pigeons have been accessing the plant rooms and walkways on the roof of the main hospital building. This has resulted in a heavy build-up of pigeon fouling on the ledges, beams, walls, floors and walkways of the plant rooms. The birds have free access to these areas as the roof area is exposed. That's in accordance with what you started out telling us.
That's not in general terms. All the plant rooms the roofs are sealed. We've got a couple of areas in the roof where we've got extract systems and the pipe work just goes to atmosphere. So those areas are not covered, but generally all the plant rooms are covered.
Okay. The picture on that page, where's that showing? Is that the roof tunnels?
That's a plant room.
What are those ducts that are in the picture? Or piping, perhaps I've got the wrong
That must just be that'll be hot and cold water. That'll be heating pipes, hot water distribution pipes, stuff like that.
It's an example of water system.
Water systems, yeah.
Pigeons being near the water system. If we skip on 2 pages to 85, narrative here again I think is in accordance with what you told us. This fouling issue poses a serious health and safety slip risk to anyone needing to use the plant room. In addition to this, pigeon fouling is not only toxic but provides a breeding ground for mites and insects which may ingress into the building. Agree with that?
Yes.
Fouling is a result of birds gaining access to the plant rooms and walkways as the area is exposed to the outside. And here you made a distinction between plant rooms and walkways. Was that correct?
Yes.
And that plant rooms are internal, walkways external.
Sorry, say that again, please.
To summarise, plant rooms are inside.
Yes.
Walkways are on the roof or outside. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
So it says this provides an attractive, quiet, safe space for the birds to roost and perch. There are also various gaps around the plant rooms which allow bird access.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at the second picture there, there's a brighter square in the middle and the tag there says gaps in plant rooms allowing pigeon access.
Yes.
See that?
Yes.
So you said a moment ago you didn't know how they were getting in, but they were getting in, words along that line. This report, in actual fact, is identifying a point of entry. or it purports to be doing that. Would you agree with that? If we go on to the next page, please, 86, the second picture here. Again, I don't know how much you can tell from this.
I don't think that's a gap to the outside. That's a gap maybe into another area. I don't think that's a gap to the physical outside. Similarly with the other one, that small gap, I don't think that was a gap to the outside. That was a gap to maybe another part of another plant room that might have been brightly lit, but I don't think in any of my times walking around I could physically see a gap that took me to the outside. So that looks as if that's what that looks like, but I don't think that was the case. I think that was a gap leading to another area within the roof space.
From your recollection, then gaps from outside to inside, or routes from outside to inside, are still a mystery.
Yes.
Is that right? But there are gaps between rooms within the hospital that pigeons can get through.
Still within the attic space, still within the plant room environment, not into the hospital as such, not into the main areas. This is all at plant room level.
Okay, so you're describing something like a maze between plant rooms,
Yes.
but there's
Yes.
no connection between the plant rooms to the rest of the hospital.
No.
The narrative at the bottom of the page is some recommendations. Initially recommend full deep clean and sanitisation of all filled areas, beams, etc., using biocide sanitizer. Removing the fouling, and the areas would then have a repeat clean of sanitizer to keep clean and leave the area safe for use. Then a separate recommendation to prevent the pigeons roosting here, we recommend the installation of bird repellent net systems to various areas of the plant room and walkways to completely exclude the pigeons, and then it goes on to describe those nets. Did you see to it that those recommendations were carried out?
I probably did. I mean, I can't remember, but anything that we could do to stop this happening, we would have done it. No question about it. But nets are a kind of temporary thing. These birds find their way through these nets. So I don't know how effective netting was ultimately.
So just to summarise your answer, you expect that these works were carried out, but you can't actually remember having done it.
Correct.
Another matter, can you recall the reports spoken of cleaning up the filled areas? Can you recall whether pressure hoses were ever used in order to do that?
I can't honestly remember that. I tended to leave the pest company to just to do it, whatever method they were doing it. I didn't stand over them, but they came back to me and told me that it was done, and then I would, 9 times out of 10, I would head back up with them and have a look at it, had the work.
Thank you. My Lord, that's my last question for this witness.
Thank you, Mr. McKeever. Now, Mr. Brattey, what I need to do is check whether there's any additional questions in the room. So what I'll do is I'll ask you to return to the witness room and should be able to call you back within the next 10 minutes, either to answer any additional questions or to have it confirmed that there's no more questions. So if I could ask Mr. Brattey to go to the witness room.
Please stand.
Mr. McKeever.
Well, there are 4 additional questions. I think they'll be very contained, so my preference would be to deal with them now.
All right. Well, we'll ask Mr. Brattey to come back and ask him these questions. Perhaps another 4 questions, Mr. Brattey.
Okay.
Mr. McKeever.
Thank you, my Lord. The first 3 of the questions relate to pigeons, which we've just dealt with. I neglected to ask you for how long pigeons had remained a problem at the hospital.
The whole time I was there.
Second question relates to what you told us about walking the job physically with GP Environmental when they came out.
Mm-hmm.
What areas did you do the walk round in?
Most of them, the plant rooms and the roof, these exposed, where the exposed pipework was. I went onto that roof as well.
So it's the areas that were mentioned in the report itself, plant rooms and roof.
Yeah. Yes.
Anywhere else in the hospital that you took them to?
I can't think there was any other locations. It was generally the plant rooms and the roof, where these exposed pipework was. I can't think of any other areas. Do you mean in the whole site, or just that the big hospital, the kids' hospital?
Generally, when they came on their visit to look at the pigeon problem, where did you take them to?
The plant rooms of the adult hospital and the exposed pipework above the children's hospital.
Are you aware that GP Environmental had done another report or another deep clean in the hospital in the around the X-ray facilities?
X-ray? No, the X-ray's in the ground floor, so memory serves me right. I've just got to think back now. No, I can't recall that. But what time? When would that have been?
I'm afraid I don't have the details of the date for it.
I don't recall that. It was any time I was involved with CP, and it was plant rooms and Motleys.
Okay, so if that happened, would it follow that was someone else that got that work done?
Possibly, yeah.
And lastly, on the pigeons issue, did you ever mention the issues with the pigeons to infection control?
I don't think I did. I think they knew about it, if you know what I mean. Everybody in the hospital, everybody on this site knew that we had a pigeon issue.
Okay. Well, last question is quite different, and it goes right back to the start of your evidence when you mentioned the issue relating to the blinds, the in-window blinds where the mechanisms had failed. Can you recall, were those blinds and failures within the isolation rooms as well as in regular wards?
I can't honestly remember that. I think it was just generally across all floors. It was quite a big issue, but I can't remember exactly if it was in those rooms as well.
If you can't remember exactly, then maybe you might or might not be able to help me with this question then. Do you recall when any of those replacements were being done, whether air pressure ever came up as an issue?
Sorry, I can't.
Yeah, I think that's enough on that point, my Lord.
Thank you, Mr. McKeever. Mr. Brattey, that's the end of your evidence, and you're therefore free to go. But before you go, can I thank you for your attendance today, but also the amount of work that will have been involved in preparing your witness statement and reading documents. So can I just repeat my thanks for that, but you're free to go. Thank you.
Thank you, my Lord. Can I take, does this remain? This question set, does this remain to go? To take?
It stays there.
Oh, it stays, right,
You
okay.
can just-
Right, okay, thank you. Well, thank you.
Please stand.
Well,
sorry.
just to confirm, I would propose that we sit again at 2 o'clock rather than, I appreciate that's a rather shorter lunch break, but unless that's inconvenient for anyone, we'll work on the basis that We'll start again at 2.